Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
Hello and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, and I'm going to talk about, in this particular episode, adult shops. Adult bookstores is another way of naming those. And if you've never been to an adult shop, what it is, it's a store in which if you have you can take your sexual interests and fantasies and you go into this particular kind of store and there everything you can think of. And it's like the place. So if you have interests in various sexual activities, whether you want to buy a costume or buy lubrication, buy condoms, see, that's something you can find at a drugstore, but you can also find it at an adult store. Magazines, there are videos. See, this is a place where, and you have to be an adult. That's why they call it an adult bookstore. And if you've never been to one, try it. Go into the store, look around, see what's there. The people that work in these stores, they understand that they have people that come in and they start gawking and looking at stuff. You know, just go in there and look, see what's there. You might find something that turns you on, that might interest you. And if your sex might be a little boring and need a tune-up, then an adult shop might be the place for you, so that you can come up with some different ideas. Like I said, there are costumes for women and men. There are books, and I'm talking books that are there that you can learn something from. And then, there's the customary magazines. There are magazines for men. There are magazines for women. There's magazines for gay, for straight. It's all of that there and then some. And why I mention this, I have my last podcast about the adult, the sex edition. I talked about an individual that I had spoken to, someone I've known for a number of years, who is familiar with the podcast, and she had shared a number of things, and she gave me the idea of talking about this. She, like I said, she's 74 and is just as smart as a whip, and she's lived more lives than I have, certainly, and has had a lot of experiences. And I found it interesting interviewing her and asking her about her experiences. And she came up with the idea of the adult shops and piercings and the whole thing. And I'll get to that in a bit. But some of the things that you will find in an adult shop that you won't find anywhere else, and I'm going to share it like that. Obviously, you can go online and you can find videos, but you can go to an adult store and buy DVDs on whatever particular fetish that you have, whether it's older women and younger men, Asian. You can find lots of variety in the adult bookstore, and that's why it exists. And you can look this up online. If you still use a phone book, I'm sure you can find it there, but you can look up the adult bookstores and adult paraphernalia online. Obviously, you can buy a lot of things online, but I'm talking about if you want to go to a place where these things exist and you can kind of touch them and feel them, and you can kind of say, hey, wow, okay, that's the thing for me. If you are new to sex and don't have a lot of experience, this might be a good place for you to go. And you will find things at the store such as a butt plug. And if you don't know what a butt plug is, it's what you put in your anus. And because there are a lot of nerve endings there, it can feel very stimulating to have that in your anus. Men use them, women use them, and I have not used one myself, so that's a disclaimer there. But I can tell you from people that I have interviewed who have, and because of all the nerve endings, the anus is very, very sensitive. So if you're into anal play, one of the ways in which people train for that is they use butt plugs, and there's various sizes. So if you're small, you get a small one. If you're larger, you use a larger one. Also, dildos. They have them that are powered. They also have them that are not powered. And there are also various sizes of the male anatomy, which women can practice with. And if you feel like you want something like that to exercise with and try out your female parts, you can find them in various sizes, and I mean huge. I've seen things at the adult store that I didn't think could exist, but somebody made that somewhere, and somebody's making a lot of money on these things, because these things aren't cheap. I'll say that. So somebody's making a lot of money, but part of the interest sometimes is actually going in and to see what people have created, see what things people have designed that we have for pleasure. Yeah, I usually get interested in the costumes and the various things that people wear for their sexual play, which it's a lot more extravagant than, say, a Halloween costume per se, but they're pretty nice. And you're going to find things in all sorts of price ranges. So if you're looking for something to sort of spice up the bedroom and between you and your partner, like I say, go to an adult shop, and I'm sure you will find something of interest to you. Now, as far as the learning portion of this, there are lots of books. And if you want to learn something about how to have safe sex, this is a place where you'll find that. If you're new to sex in general, you'll find books on that. If you're new to anal sex or oral sex or group sex, whatever it is you're interested in, you can find it at the adult shop. And there's obviously a stigma associated with this. So you see people that walk in and out. This kind of harkens back to how in our culture we had stigmatized sex in and of itself. So anyone walking into an adult shop, there must be something wrong with them. Well, I'm not prescribing that in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying that the stores are there. And if you have an interest and you want to find out about something, an adult shop may be something for you to stop in and check out. My experience with going to an adult shop happened because there was a friend of mine who was getting a degree in human sexuality. She was studying in San Francisco. So one of her professors said, okay, you need to go into an adult bookstore and you're going to have to catalog all of the magazine covers that you see in the bookstore. And she asked me to come along. I said, okay, well, I'll go. And we went into the store, and I have to, if I'm recalling correctly, there were no less than 300 different magazines in this adult store. Literally. So that is, now cataloging them, I'm drawing a blank on how exactly she did that, because it was her project, but we were cataloging whether there were men on the cover, whether there were women on the cover, whether it was couples, so whether they were gay or they're straight. So there were lots of magazines and obviously lots of photographs. So for those who go to the stores and want to stare at photographs of naked people, they are there. That's one of the things that exists in an adult bookstore, is adult magazines, and that's kind of where it started. So the other things that they have in an adult shop, as I've shared, the butt plugs, the videos, and all these other things, a lot of that was done because, well, where else were people going to get this? I mean, now with the advent of the internet, there's so much that you have access to at your fingertips. But before that, you had to go to a brick and mortar store. And that's one of the reasons why these stores exist. So I'm going to pick up with that after the break.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
And we're back. This is Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, the Sex Edition. And I'm talking about adult shops. And they've been in existence for years and years and years and years. And for those of you who might be relatively inexperienced at something like that, I mean, the internet is everything to you. Well, before there was the internet, this was the place you went to get adult items. Really, it was a store. It was a brick and mortar store. And a lot of people probably have not experienced that and wondered, what did people do in the past? And that's what they did. They went to an adult shop. And it had a stigma associated with it. Certainly. These were on the edges of town, and they didn't want them anywhere near where kids were, because they sure enough didn't want kids looking at the posters that they would have in an adult store and all the things, all the sexual paraphernalia that they have in a store. And they have a lot of stuff. As I said, they've got costumes, they've got whips, they have videos, they have lubricants, and any and everything related. And, depending upon your community, I actually went to some stores in San Francisco, which tends to be a much more of a liberal city. So you will find things there in the store. And again, this was, for me, was interesting because I was dating somebody at the time who was getting a master's degree in human sexuality. So it was her job to go into these stores and see what was there. And I think the thing that I want to share with you as I've talked about this, what it was, or what it is, what I remember is, it was a place where people went to so that they can buy things to enhance their sexual pleasure. And in particular, and I recall this in particular in the places in San Francisco, you generally had people who were working in the stores who were very knowledgeable about sex. So that if you had questions, and I mean legitimate questions about sexuality, how to use a butt plug, and so many other things, there was somebody there who could explain it to you. If you had human sexuality in school, whether it was college or what else, it was very clinical in how they talked about it. And obviously that was the purpose of the school. They're going to teach you about things, but they're not going to teach you about the lifestyle and the culture. They're just going to teach you about it in a very clinical fashion. But when you go to an adult shop, now you're going to actually be talking. Oftentimes you will find somebody there who's very knowledgeable about the scene. And one of the scenes that I recall is there were parties, or there were places that you go to. And now I will say I've never seen an orgy. I've never been in one. So I'm not going to talk about it from that aspect. But what I do recall seeing is there were people who would play out certain scenes. They'd use a whip, and you have these partners. They're couples, let's say, and one is using the whip on the other, and they have safe words, and you talk about it. And how do you have a scene? And somebody would say, okay, we have this couple here, and this is what they do. And you would observe that couple, having their sexual encounter. And it wasn't vaginal sex. It wasn't penetration. It wasn't something like that. Their erotic scene would be something like I just described. They're dressed in a costume and somebody is having a whip and they're just giving a little tap on the rear or across the back or whatever they are in, whatever fetish that they're into. And I even watched some people use electric shocks. I mean, that's something that stimulates some people. And this, you wouldn't learn this in a college, on a college campus or anything like that. At least I don't believe you would, unless you had a wild party. But this was an opportunity for people to go and observe, like I was doing, and learn something about it. And it's very interesting, the people that you meet. People have lifestyles. I mean, in the day they're wearing suits and ties and very prim and proper looking, but by evening they have other things that they are into. And depending upon your community, some communities are definitely not into this kind of thing, and you won't see those kind of stores there. But if you're a person who is interested in knowing about what goes on in something like, say, an adult shop or a place where they have certain scenes, then by all means, find your way to one and learn something about it. You don't have to participate because, as in my particular case, I was an observer. I was a spectator. And once you see it, if it's something you want to take, participate in, I'm sure you can probably find yourself someone there and or go on the internet and find a partner to do those kinds of things with. But as it were, it was very interesting for me to go out and do the research and to learn about something like that, because I had heard, and I want to emphasize something that if I haven't said it enough, one of the things that was always talked about in all of the bookstores, in all of the adult shops, and the people who were behind the counter, they always emphasized safe sex. Always, 100% of the time. And experiencing that part of it, obviously, it wasn't what I expected. I just sort of expected, you walk into a store and you don't look anybody in the eye because everybody is there just trying to hide their face. But it was not that. It was people who respected that sex is very much a part of who we are as human beings. And how do you get pleasure with that? And it's not about being shamed, but it's about enjoying yourself and you and your partner, and being accepting of yourself for that. That's very important. And like I said, they emphasize safe sex over and over and over. And I could appreciate that, because that is very important when it comes to sexuality, being safe, being respected, being honored. I mean, that's something that we would, if you didn't expect that in an adult bookstore or an adult shop, it is something that obviously they want to promote because they want your patronage. So they're going to take all of that ugly, dirty, seamy side of it out because they want it to be more mainstream. I mean, they're not going to stay in business if they make it something that's dirty. So they have to liven it up and make it interesting to people. And the people that work behind the counter, I have talked to a few of them, and they're very respectable people. I don't get into their sex practices or habits or anything like that. But if you have a question about what to do with a particular something that you see on the shelf, you're curious about it, I'm sure that they would help you understand that and what it is as much as anyone else would, as much as they could reasonably understand it themselves. So that's what I find in an adult shop. I'm going to take a break, and I'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello, and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, the Sex Edition. And I've been talking about adult shops. Now, I'm not sure what you have in your community, but I have been to a couple in my day and to walk in and see. And initially, my experience was I was with a friend who was getting a master's degree in human sexuality, and it was one of her assignments was to go into an adult shop and then sort of catalog, the beginning of which was to catalog all the covers. And there was just a plethora of magazines there, which I thought was fascinating because I said, wow, it was sensory overload. And what I can tell you, honestly, for myself, after looking at all of those magazine covers, I really didn't care to look at any more magazines. I mean, at one time, there was sort of a novelty to it for me because, you're looking at pictures of naked people and that's supposed to be entertaining, erotic, so on and so forth. But I can't tell you the last time I actually looked at a magazine with naked people in it that wasn't, specifically related to art in and of itself. And, so that's me. But there are so many things in an adult bookstore that are related to sexual enjoyment. Beads, body stockings, and I think obviously there'd be videos that would be there. And if you're into piercings, they would have things like that there. And it may even be associated with a piercing shop. So if you have interest, or tattoos or things like that. So if you have an interest in that, then there is the place for you to go. I was asked the question, what is a fetish? I've looked it up. It's a noun. It's a form of sexual desire in which gratification is linked to an abnormal degree to a particular object, item of clothing, part of the body, etc. So, for example, a fetish, a shoe fetish. So that means you have an interest you like shoes. They're erotic to you. Feet, shoes, boots, synonymous with a fixation, obsession, compulsion, mania, weakness, fantasy. I'm reading this from my smartphone. It's a fad, fascination, thing, hang up. And there's an alternate explanation. It's an inanimate object worshipped for its supposed magical powers or because it is considered to be inhabited by a spirit. So that explains fetish. And you could have a shoe, like I said, a shoe fetish, foot fetish. I'm interested in what women have fetishes about. And I'm talking about in more of an erotic sense, not just the fact that they like to have lots of things, but it's what really makes women, what gets women turned on. I'll have to ask that. And I'll answer that for you in the next podcast. I wonder for you if getting a massage is it more of a medicinal thing for you, meaning you get a massage because you got stiff, sore muscles and you just really like that, being able to get somebody to work your joints and get you relaxed? Or is it more of, for you, is it more sensual? Now, I can imagine if you have what's called the erogenous zones, these are areas that are a little more stimulated in terms of your libido kind of thing, that, yeah, it would feel good, you'd get turned on, it'd be sexy. But is it that way for you all the time? For me, it's not. For me, I can appreciate just getting a massage, and I could literally fall asleep, and I'm not turned on the least. But I guess that really depends upon who's doing the massage, because if it's my partner and she's doing the massage, then it's kind of takes on a different thing. But if I'm just there getting a massage from a masseuse, a professional, there's no there's no crossing the line there for me. It's strictly professional, and that's the way I'm able to keep it. I asked women this question, and here was the response that I got. It was very interesting, and it kind of helped me dial down with maybe how it works for me. There is a sense of feeling good. There's sort of an erotic feeling, but it is not tied to wanting to be sexual with the masseuse. It is just the fact that it feels good, and it gets the juices flowing, it gets your blood flowing. And, that's the whole point of a massage, is to get adequate blood flow. But think about this. If you give your partner a massage, then, there is the therapeutic part, but then there's the intimacy part of that too. There's something that follows. So if, let's say maybe you're having a challenge with your partner and having some intimacy issues, I think that would be a good way in order to break the ice. Given that, we've did the adult store, and we've gone there for suggestions, and we've got the costume, and we're sort of setting the stage here. So how can we get to the next place with this, and share some some erotic times with your partner? You can say, when we get home, we're going to, this particular evening, you get the massage, and on another evening, you get to be the recipient. So that's a good way to share some intimacy, to kind of get some ideas and some juices flowing. And I'm sure that idea was probably in one of those books at the bookstore if you thought to pick up one. And hey, here's something I want you to do. I want you to decide from between you and your partner, pick one thing that you would like to do this week with each other, and have a good time with it. And then figure out something that you can reciprocate. So in other words, you get it one particular evening, it's going to be your turn, and then you're apart. So you negotiate something, figure out what it is you want to do, whether it's going to be both the same night, different nights, one for a week, another week, whatever it is. But think about that. And that way you two can make each other feel special. I invite you, take that challenge, do that for you and your lover, and see what good stuff can happen. I also want you to think about this. Think of something that you haven't told your partner about you in an erotic sense. I don't mean just the generic stuff, but think about something new, something you haven't told your partner, and I want you to share. I want you two to talk about that. And the idea here is to kind of get a conversation going and to keep it focused on the two of you, so that you guys can make each other feel special. And this is personal time. This isn't just some generic sit over the dinner table kind of have this. This is about intimacy. So you're not going to want to have this in mixed company. You just want to have this amongst yourselves, because again, I'm trying to help you and your partner be focused on each other. And when you practice this sort of thing, this kind of sharing on this sort of depth, I mean, it may be new to you, so you may be clumsy at it at first, and that's okay, because this isn't about perfection. This is about building a relationship with your significant other, and having it be a little spicy. See, that's what's fun. This is something that you do, and if you're struggling with your romance, your erotic part of your relationship, then this is a way to kind of bridge that and get the fire going again. And take the time to do it. Really invest in it. It's important to you. I don't know too many people who don't like sex, but it can become stale if you don't come up with something fresh every once in a while. So there you are. There's your idea. There's your suggestions. I'm John Johnson. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, the Sex Edition. I want to thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast. part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.